Only 4 months later, the authorities tell you that there is not enough evidence to prosecute this person, therefore the case is unfounded. The first time I heard that word was during my first physical assault in South Korea. The facts do not matter. It was the outcome and events thereafter that affected me and still affect me the most. On the night of the assault, December 1st, 2012, my supervisor rushed me to the emergency room for nurse to evaluate me and begin the process of reporting. I would advise all service members to start with a restricted report. You can always go unrestricted later. There are only 3 personnel you can talk about a sexual incident: a medical staff, law enforcement, or sharp representative. This is particularly important. If you tell anyone else like your supervisor, they are not sworn to protect your confidentiality, and it will compromise your restricted reporting and make your report unrestricted. This is where victimization came into play, and it was here that I was forever stigmatized with a label above my head that told the world I was a survivor of sexual violence. Reporting a sexual assault and harassment case is very humiliating. Now imagine, you are in a room with your supervisor and the medical provider sitting there in tears, scared and humiliated. The provider asks you to tell him what happened, the sexual acts, and jotting he said, she said right in front of you. Nonetheless, during the process, they collect what is called a rape kit, where the use of black lights, cotton swabs, inspections of bruises, all evidence they can collect, clothing articles, with hair and saliva collections. When all is said and done, at least in my case, I had to spend 3 to 4 days in a room with investigators, and no sleep, no food, and held against my will to leave. Have you ever been interrogated? I felt ashamed, humiliated, embarrassed, and like I was a criminal. You know it is funny because if one person looked at me, no one would believe that I have endured so much agony. Most people view me as being this genuine, positive, outgoing person who probably grew up in a white picket fence house with love and appreciation from having a good childhood. Intermittently, there are other procedures in the process, but I want to convey how I felt after the incidents. After reporting to Criminal Investigation Command, my story was out. All the sharp representatives could say was, "Good job," and that was the right thing to do. You spoke up. But deep down inside, I felt disgusted with myself. How I could let this happen to me again. These feelings were deeper than when I was a child. When the assaults occurred, my body went numb, and my mind was barely involved. There are 3 things that evoke the flight, fight, or freeze response in your body when you undergo a traumatic event. My body felt it was in danger enough to evoke the freeze response for most of these assaults, for these offenders to not kill me if I resisted, and threats were made to harm me further if I resisted. That was the beginning of being victimized, and it just got worse throughout the year. Immediately after reporting, I had to return to the barracks only to find out my commander wanted to speak with me. Hence, I walked to her office only to be humiliated once again. I was voluntold to sleep on a cot in the staff duty office and monitored for the first 3 days after the assault as a suicide risk. From there, I was allowed back in my room and only allowed to leave the battalion if I had one of my NCO's supervisors was present. During that treatment, which lasted well over a month, I was forced to attend behavioral health classes, all the while being threatened by my commander to be chaptered due to her interpretation of my failure to adapt to the military environment. Furthermore, I was outcasted by my unit because a corrupt little bird told everyone I was assaulted. Please consider the possibility, by understanding and imagining yourself in my combat boots, that by being isolated and mistreated, any soldier would want to take their own life. I finally understood why the military has so many suicides, and in those conditions all I could do was huddle on the floor wailing out loud, crying through the walls and screaming at myself. The feeling of disgust grew deeper and deeper, until one day I looked in the mirror and decided to volunteer for the base in MWR, Morale, Welfare, and Recreation Program. They were holding a modeling event or talent show, and I signed up. After that uplifting event, I was able to move forward, and I attempted to train for the Air Assault Mobile unit that was coming to Camp Casey, South Korea. As the negative stigma followed me throughout my 1-year tour, I reluctantly treaded lightly up until I was assaulted yet again at the end of my tour. I wish I never had reported this second time due to the first being so traumatic and the investigators victim shaming, blaming, and continuously asking me or warning me of making a false statement. Unfortunately, this second assault ended up following me to my current unit, which I am still being, in a sense, victimized for. Remarkably, I was able to pass all the rigors of the air assault entry test. The entry test consisted of an obstacle course, rope climbing, and a 12-mile ruck with full gear and a cap time of 3 hours to pre-qualify. I passed it in the dead freezing cold, with full gear and weapon, assault pack and helmet within 2 hours and 50 minutes. I was the only female in my battalion S1 to try out for this air assault pre-qualification. In my mind I thought, I can do this. I am not going to allow these circumstances to overcome me, and I will prove my ability to continue the fight. I've shown what it truly means to be resilient and persevere. But let's be real, getting to where I am today wasn't easy. It took courage and sheer willpower to push through the fear of retaliation, the disrespect I faced from past units, and the crushing weight of my own self-doubt. I speak to you not just as an advocate, but as a survivor of sexual violence. For 75% of my life, I've walked through disaster and trauma. But the remaining 25%, it's filled with beauty, growth, and moments of peace. The strength I hold now matches the pain I once endured, and today, I stand here, happy, healthy, and whole. I'm incredibly grateful for the people who stood by me, such as my 1st Battalion Commander Eric L. Jackson, who lifted me when I couldn't lift myself. And now, whether in this life or the next, I am determined to help others, especially survivors of sexual violence, find their own power and healing. Women and men deserve more than just the feeling of empowerment. They deserve to be empowered, to reclaim their voices, their strength, and their futures. The more people I reach with this message, the closer we get to a world that fully understands the gravity of this issue. And maybe, just maybe, we'll see a day where zero tolerance isn't just a policy but a way of life. 3. What is MST? What is MST? Military sexual trauma. The VA Veteran Affairs uses the term military sexual trauma MST to refer to sexual assault or threatening, sexual harassment experienced during military service. MST includes any sexual activity during military service in which you are involved against your will or when unable to say no. Examples include being pressured or coerced into sexual activities, such as with threats of negative treatment if you refuse to cooperate or with promises of better treatment, and sexual contact or activities without your consent, including when you were asleep or intoxicated, and being overpowered or physically forced to have sex, being touched or grabbed in a sexual way that made you uncomfortable, including during hazing experiences, comments about your body or sexual activities that you found threatening, unwanted sexual advances that you found threatening. Some of the difficulties both female and male survivors of MST military sexual trauma may include, but not all inclusive. Strong emotions, having intense sudden emotional responses to things, feeling all the time, feelings of numbness, feeling emotionally flat, and